Oregon man sent to prison twice for violent crimes is trying to get out on parole.
In the 1970s, George NULPH kidnapped and murdered a mother on the coast. He served time for that, was let out of prison, and within weeks, new violent crimes here in the Portland area. Amy Frazier joins us with a preview of tomorrow's parole hearing. Amy?
Well, George NULPH has spent most of his life in prison. The 64-year-old argues he's no longer a danger to the community. However, the district attorneys where he committed his crimes are fighting to keep him locked up.
In 1976, Frances Christians was on her way home from work in Cannon Beach to her two young children when she was abducted by George NULPH, who kidnapped her, sexually assaulted her, and then shot her execution style.
George William NULPH was given a life sentence for murder in 1976 for crimes that shocked the small beachside community in Clatsop County.
And less than 10 years later, the Department of Corrections gave him a, quote, temporary leave and simply let him out of prison.
Less than 2 months later, NULPH committed sex crimes in Multnomah County.
The reason Measure 11 passed, the reason we developed even moderately tough on crime laws in the 1990s was because of cases like NULPH's.
In 1987, a judge sentenced NULPH to a minimum of 80 years in prison for the sex crimes. But later that year, the parole board reviewed his sentence, deemed it excessive, and reduced it, making him eligible for parole now.
I mean, one can make an argument, I suppose, that the man has done, 30 years in prison for the rapes, which was the minimum that he was sentenced. So, why not give him a chance to, show that he's in fact rehabilitated himself?
But he says, remember this, 10 years before the sex crimes,
he had stalked, kidnapped, and murdered a woman, and that sort of popped out of existence because it was lost by the institutional memory of the state of Oregon.
According to court documents, part of NULPH's fight to get a parole hearing, NULPH says the antisocial personality disorder that made him dangerous is in remission. And the parole hearing is tomorrow morning in Salem. We're told that a decision could take some time. We'll let you know what happens. Jeff?
Amy, thank you. And be sure to check out KOIN.com for much more on this story. You can also find the latest on all our top stories and a full check of the forecast.
In Oregon.
All right, so we're just waiting. Hopefully it'll be starting up here in the next minute or two, and once it does, then we'll be live. And I looked this one up, and man, that's pretty outrageous. They let him out, and 2 months later he reoffended. So he's in his 60s now. I'm pretty sure there's going to be some organizations that are going to be supporting his release. Let's see what he has to say for himself. All right, 8:15, and nothing yet.
Good morning, Mr. Brown. Would you go ahead and mute your microphone? Thank you.
Okay, when I find the button, let's see what. Oh, let's see.
Good morning. We'll be starting just a few minutes late, just for some technical issues. Thanks. Mr. Nolf, can you hear me? Can you say something?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Want to make sure the microphone was on. Ms. Riley, can you please mute your microphone?
Are you talking to me?
No, I said Ms. Riley.
I'm sorry, I don't.
All right, good morning, everybody. We are on the record at this time. Mr. NULPH, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. For the record, is your name George NULPH?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and is your SID number 422-8052?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Just have to make sure I'm talking to the right person this morning. So Mr. NULPH, my name is John Bailey. I'm the board chair, and I'm going to be leading your hearing today. Did you receive your packet of materials and your notice of rights from the board at least 14 days ago?
Yes.
I do want to take a moment to introduce the other board members participating in your hearing today. So first we have board member Kelly Kuklinski.
Good morning, Mr. NULPH.
Good morning.
And we have board member Don Reese this morning as well.
Good morning, Mr. NULPH. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Great. Thank you.
And Mr. NULPH, we also have, of course, members of our staff who are helping to just make sure that all of our equipment's running properly this morning, that the hearing's being recorded properly. We do these hearings via video. Sometimes we have technical issues happen during the hearing. So if that happens, sir, it's no cause for alarm. What we'll do is we'll just make sure we pause the hearing, solve whatever the problem is, and then we'll get going with the hearing again, okay?
Yes, sir.
We also, of course, have present this morning your attorney, Jody Davis, who's appearing via video. Good morning to you, Ms. Davis.
Good morning. Thank you.
And you can hear everyone okay? Just making sure?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you. We also have present representing one of the committing jurisdictions here today. From the Clatsop County District Attorney's Office, we have District Attorney Ron Brown appearing, I think via video. Mr. Brown, are you with us?
Here, thank you.
Great, and I'm assuming, Mr. Brown, you wanted to make a statement to the board later in today's hearing?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so much for being here. We will make sure that we call on you at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much.
We also have present, Mr. NULPH, one of the victims in your cases, specifically the victim from the Multnomah County cases that you were convicted of, who's present today, Virginia B. Virginia, if you can just unmute and just let me know that you can hear me, that would be really appreciated.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you very, very much for being here. It is my understanding that you may want to make a statement to the board later today. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, absolutely. We will make sure that happens, and I will call on you later in today's hearing to provide your statement at that time. Thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
All right, so Mr. NULPH, do you have any questions about who's present for today's hearing?
No, sir, I don't.
Okay, so this is the time that is set for your exit interview hearing, which is a hearing to determine whether to firm up your projected parole release date. And it's my understanding that at this time, your projected parole release date, just gonna make sure I find it here, is February 19th, 2025. So the purpose of this hearing today is to decide whether to firm up that date and to release you onto parole, or potentially to defer that date to a later time. The board ordered and you participated in a psychological evaluation for today's hearing that was prepared by Dr. Michelle Mosick, and that report was dated August 21st, 2024. Did you receive that report, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. And did you review it?
Yes, I have.
Okay, good. So we're going to, I'm sure, have some questions for you from that report a little bit later in today's hearing. And the next thing I want to do then is establish the exhibits that we've accepted into the record. So Mr. NULPH, these are the documents that the board has reviewed for your case today and for your hearing today. We have not reviewed any documents outside of the documents that I'm going to list off here in just a second. So the first set of documents that the board reviewed for today and is accepted into the record were the materials that were submitted by the parole board in the hearings packet that we sent to you at least 14 days prior to today's date. No confidential documents have been received for your case. So really, Mr. Nulph, what that just means is that every document that the board has reviewed for your case for today's hearing, you have the exact same documents we do. We don't have something you don't. The next set of documents that we've accepted into the record were documents submitted from your attorney, Ms. Davis, that consisted of a 41-page packet of materials that contained a document entitled Petitioner's Parole Hearing Memorandum with a number of attachments. So we've accepted those into the record and we've reviewed those documents. We also received a total of 8 letters of support that I counted that were spread across 6 different individual packets. So most of these were single packet or packets with 2 or 3 letters attached to them. There was maybe one packet with 1 letter, then another packet with another letter. Just for the sake of time, I'm not going to rattle off every single packet, but just know we received those 8 letters of support, and we did receive a last-second letter of support. I'm going to find the exact letter here. I just want to make sure you knew about this.
This was the letter from Ronald Haney, I believe.
Yes, I think it was a letter, and it was from someone incarcerated in another state, I think.
Yes, Mr. Haney.
Okay, so y'all know about this, it sounds like.
I don't believe Mr. Nulph did, because I just received it yesterday, but
I received a copy of that letter this morning.
Oh, you did? Okay, very good. So given that you've received this, counsel, and that you've received this, Mr. Nulph, I'm not inclined to hold the record open any further from today since everyone seems to know about it. I'm assuming that works for you, Ms. Davis?
absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, just want to make sure. All right, so we do have that letter. And then lastly, Mr. Nulph, we received a packet of materials, a 10-page packet of materials that contained 2 different letters that were submitted to the board by Mary Ann Colby, and we've accepted those into the record and reviewed those letters. So with that said, are there any documents that you think I'm missing that we've accepted into the record, either Ms. Davis or you, Mr. Nulph?
Not that I am aware of, no.
No.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And as I said, Mr. Nulph, we've reviewed those documents, read them all prior to today's hearing. All right, and then the last thing I want to talk about, Mr. Nulph, is just kind of how we're going to proceed today. So the first thing that's going to happen is you or your attorney on your behalf, or both of you if you want, will have the opportunity to make an opening statement to the board. It's really just your opportunity, sir, to let us know any thoughts that you have, anything you want us to know prior to us beginning to ask you questions. You can use that time however you want to use it. It's there for you if you want to. And then after that, the board members are going to be asking you a series of questions. And we're going to ask you questions on topics of things like your spending account and finances, your programming and reformation activities, your employment and educational history, the psychological evaluation, your health issues, if any, your institutional disciplinary history, your criminal history, including the crimes for which you've been convicted of, and your release plan if you were to be paroled. I don't know what every board member has a question for you on. I don't know what they're going to ask you. So the first thing that's going to happen is I'll ask you questions on these topics. Then I'll turn it over to the other board members on those topics to ask you those questions before we move on to future topics. Mr. Nulph, I do want to just acknowledge that, I know your case. I've actually been on one of your prior hearings. So there may be some topics that I frankly don't have very many questions for you just because I know your history, if that makes sense. So after we finish asking you questions, we will then hear from Clatsop County District Attorney Ron Brown and any statement he wants to make to the board. Then Virginia B will have the opportunity to address the board. And then the last thing that's going to happen is you or your attorney will have the opportunity to respond to any of the statements that were made by Mr. Brown or Virginia B, or as also to provide any closing comments or remarks that you have for us for today's hearing. It is possible that we'll take a break or two this morning, just kind of depending on how long the hearing is going. Mr. Nulph, it is completely fine if you need a break at some point to just tell me that you need a break. And if you do, we'll try and time one to suit your needs as well as everybody else's. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think that covered everything I have for you before we really got to the bulk of the hearing. The last thing I guess I will tell you is I have two screens that I use. And if I'm looking you over to the side like this, it's not that I'm not paying attention to you. It's just that that's where all my notes are. You're in front of me. My notes are to the right. So if you see me looking to the right, it's just because I'm typing some notes out and looking at my notes and questions that I have for you. I promise I'm listening to you, okay? All right, so with that, Mr. NULPH, I'm going to turn it over to you to make either you or your attorney, Ms. Davis, to make any opening statement. I'll let y'all tell me how you want to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. I'm going to make a brief statement, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. NULPH to conclude those our opening. I just want to first note for mostly just to preserve for the record that we are here for the exit interview under OAR 255-060-0006, and to the extent that that concerns Mr. NULPH's 1976 index offenses. And while his criminal record, of course, is of concern, I'd just like to note that he has already completed the maximum sentence for the 1986 charges in which he was returned to custody. And therefore, to the extent that any DA or victim testimony would sort of include things outside of the relevant factors relating to this particular exit interview on the 1976 index offenses, I would just ask that that be struck from the record or but not giving weight in deliberation on this matter. Aside from that, thank you everybody for being here today. I know that Mr. NULPH has had previous hearings before the board that were comprised of both the exit interview portion as well as a dangerous offender hearing and or prison term hearings, and the last of which was in 2020. And today's hearing is distinct from prior hearings in that we are only here for review of the exit interview criteria, which the board is aware of, includes a release plan, victim statements, PSR, psychological reports, conduct while in confinement, and any other information they may believe relevant to reintegration in the community. And I don't want to go into the details of the procedural background of Mr. NULPH's incarceration. Suffice it to say, there was an oversight. It appears that Mr. NULPH had not been given an actual matrix calculated date when the 1986 crime occurred, which was then issued in 2016 and retroactively set at 1990. So essentially, I just asked that the board basically consider the adequacy of Mr. NULPH's release plan, that we have addressed the criteria set out in 255-060-0008 regarding plans for employment, income, residence, a description of the support services he would access in the community, programming opportunities and treatment. We've also noted the current list of prescribed medications, and Mr. NULPH would be, I'm sure, able to go into more detail about his current health situation, but he has plans to address that in the community as well. And it should be noted that Mr. NULPH does agree with any and all of the suggestions that were set out by the evaluator in the 2024 mental health evaluation as well. And in regards to the psychological evaluation, as we noted in the memorandum, Mr. NULPH was not given a diagnosis which would substantively back a finding of a present or severe emotional disturbance such to constitute the danger to the health and safety of the community, and that under 255-060-0012, that were that to be grounds for delaying his release, that it would require not only the present and severe emotional disturbance itself, but also that danger was so severe that it could not be appropriately controlled such that it would still be a risk to the health and safety of the community. And so I would just ask that given the parole plan, even if the board should have concerns regarding Mr. Nulph's mental health in any way, that I believe that these concerns could be very well controlled and ameliorated through the services and counseling he hopes to continue to engage with in the outside community. I'd also like to note just briefly that years ago, Mr. Nulph was surprised to find he had received a letter from the daughter of the victim in the 1976 index offenses, who had questions for him about the crime. And ultimately, the two began exchanging correspondence. And she has expressed that since 2016, while she cannot speak on behalf of other members of the family, but speaking for herself, she did not oppose Mr. Nulph's parole and expressed that she had forgiven him for the very terrible harm that he had caused not only to her mother, but their family and the community. And just in closing, today, Mr. Nulph is 72. In addition to the other health conditions he's experienced, he's had several strokes. He is legally blind. He is partially deaf. And despite all of those things, he would be the first to say what a different person he is today from the person that entered prison, certainly in 1976 and again in 1986, that he has fought tirelessly to participate in a wide array of programming, anger management, empathy, communication work. He's done multiple rounds of sex offender treatment. He's done one-on-one counseling, which he's been very lucky to have the opportunity to engage with while in custody. That's not something many people are able to do. And he's done all that by choice. He recognized the need to make significant changes. He did not like the person he was. He did not like the behaviors that he engaged with. And I think this is recognized and seen by the many individuals who have supported Mr. Nulph and have written letters expressing their support and who will continue to be there for him were he to be released to the community. So I'm just hopeful that the board will see the man Mr. Nulph is today and find that he is able to be released. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn to Mr. Nulph if you have any comments you would like to make before the board asks you some questions, okay?
Yes, thank you. I'd first like to begin by just apologizing for us to even have to be here for this and for my actions that would make this meeting necessary. If it was possible, I would personally like to apologize to victims and victims' families and friends and my family and friends and to the community for my actions and the distress that it caused and the pain and the hurt. And I understand that there's nothing I can say or do to undo what I have done. But over the last 48 years, particularly in the last 38 years, the things I have done have helped me unbecome that monster that I was, and that I'm not that same person that I was 48 years ago or 38 years ago. I'm a different person now, and I hope that the board will see and recognize that individual is quite different from the person on paper before them and reviewing the crimes that I have committed. And that if given the opportunity, and should the board grant parole, that I'll be able to be a productive and positive influence in the community and successfully complete, not embarrass the parole board in any way. And I thank you for the opportunity to perhaps show you some of that during this hearing time. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Nulph. Thank you, Ms. Davis, for your opening statements. And Mr. Nulph, just so you're aware, you know, we do have one of the victims, of course, for your crimes present today, as you know. And just so you're aware, I just want to kind of make this clear now, just to avoid any kind of confusion. It is absolutely essential. It's part of the board's process that you not talk to her directly, just like the board is going to ask Virginia, if Virginia makes a statement, to only address those comments to the board. We do not allow folks to communicate directly with each other in hearing. So I just want you to know that, just so you're just aware of that's the rule, okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, good. All right, so Mr. Nulph, I'm gonna start off by asking you questions about your finances. I'm also gonna include in that questions about your educational and employment history. Again, given the fact that I know you and your case well, I don't have any questions for you about education and employment, but the other board members might. So I'm going to see if they have questions for you on that here in just a moment. So for your financial situation, I just want to confirm, sir, can you tell me how much money you have saved in total at this time and where that money is?
I think Ms. Davis has that all quoted down in her statement to the board, memorandum, if I may take a moment here to look. I can tell you that I have approximately $8,000 in trust with a friend who has been assisting me in final preparations, I guess you would say, in purchasing a burial plot and arranging a prepaid funeral policy so that none of that burden has to fall on any family or anything. I'm hoping I'd be able to do that. And my friend Mickey Van Riek has got approximately $8,000, and I believe I was about $4,800 in the OSU Federal Credit Union. I have in savings and a little over $1,000, almost $2,000 in checking there with them. Exactly how much is in my trust account here in DOC, it's somewhere, I think, around $2,000. I don't think I found that here, but I think I've quoted it fairly accurately anywhere close to it.
Well, the reason I like to ask is because, especially when it comes to money, things change, and they change pretty quickly. So that's why I just wanted to make sure I had an understanding of exactly how much you got available to you. So it sounds like the $8,000 in trust with a friend is really about planning for future funeral costs, but it sounds like you have roughly $6,000 to $8,000 available to you elsewhere in various places. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. That's the questions I have for you on these topics. So let me check in with my other board members. So Ms. Kuklinski, do you have any questions for Mr. Nulph about education, employment, or finances?
I just had a clarifying question on I saw there was a number of not deposits, but transfers of money out, some rather large transfers out to Mary Bambrick, as well as to Jody Davis. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about those transfers of funds.
Okay, yes, the transfer of the $10,000 to Mary Bambrick, we call her Mickey, was for, she has been helping me. She is the executor of my funeral arrangements, and she has purchased for me a burial plot in the Ocean View Cemetery in Warrington, Oregon, and we'll be using the rest of those funds for prepaid funeral arrangements.
Okay.
And that will be necessary at the time of when I become deceased.
Okay, and then the money out to Jody Davis?
Yeah, Ms. Davis is my attorney representing me here at this hearing.
Okay, for the purposes of today's hearing. Okay, got it. And then I just wanted to confirm with you, and I know that I missed this in the materials. I'm sure that I read it, but I couldn't find it. With your existing medical issues, are you currently working or are you unable to work?
No, I do work here at the institution. I am an orderly, an officer's area orderly. I clean the areas where the officer's desk is and clean the officer's bathroom in that area.
Okay, great. Okay, those were the only questions I had for these topics. I will check in with Mr. Reese.
Thank you. I don't have any questions on these topics.
Okay, thank you both. So, Mr. NULPH, I want to turn to questions about your health. And, you know, in reading through your packets and just knowing what I know about your history, I know you've had a lot of different health concerns. I think I counted in your packet, you take, 9 or 10 different medications or so. That was included in the materials. So really, I just want to kind of get a sense for you in today's hearing. What are your primary health concerns now? When you think about what you're worried about or what you feel like you most need to have addressed, what's top of mind to you about your health?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Was I breaking up or could you just not hear me?
Yeah, you're kind of fading in and out a little bit, and
okay. I'm gonna get a little closer to the screen then. And is this better?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. All right. If you ever can't understand me, I do want you to let me know. So please, please keep letting me know if that happens. Okay. As I was telling you, I've counted that you take a lot of medications, and I know from your history, you've had a lot of health issues. So what I want to just get a sense from for today's hearing is, what are your health issues that you're particularly worried about or that you feel like you particularly need to have addressed? Like, what are your primary concerns for your health right now?
Okay, yes. I guess one of my primary concerns would be now is last time I saw Dr. Stuther, my oncologist, he's got some real concerns because my white blood cell count is kind of out of whack, and he requested another bone marrow biopsy to see whether the cancer that I do have has developed into leukemia or not, and that has bone biopsy has not occurred yet, so I don't know whether it has developed into leukemia or not. I guess that would be my main concern, because the cancer that I have, which causes my platelets to elevate very high and exponentially, can be controlled by oral medication. And but if it's developed into leukemia, that's a whole nother animal that we'll have to work to deal with. And so, yeah, I have some concerns about that possibility right now.
So is the kind of cancer you have now that could turn into leukemia, is it like pre-cancer? Like it's not yet cancer, but can turn into cancer? I just was curious about that.
Well, when I was diagnosed in 2003, Dr. Muhammad told me, he says, you got a cancer, but he says, you got to have it. It's the best kind you can have because it can be controlled by oral medication. And it mimics leukemia in the fact that I can bleed very easily and occasionally get nosebleeds or and that like leukemia patients would. And of course, then it also, strangely enough, can cause clotting and blood clots, which occurred and were the results of my strokes that I got. And he diagnosed me with essential thrombocythemia, and I mean that's all I can really tell you about that. That I've been fortunate enough for many years to keep that pretty much under control, just with oral medication. And now we're a little concerned that it possibly may have elevated up beyond that and into leukemia, but I don't know. We won't know, I guess, until a bone marrow biopsy is performed.
Have you been told what your risk for future strokes is? Like, how high risk you are for another stroke?
I hope I don't have another stroke. Strokes are always possible, yes. The first stroke I had was because of the blood clot, and that also resulted in total blindness in my right eye and the continued deterioration of vision in my left eye to the point they declared me legally blind in 2010. And then I had a bleeding stroke when they administered a blood clotting medication, clot buster, and at the time, fortunately, I was in the hospital when that occurred. And then the third stroke a few months later, which was rather mild stroke, fortunately. And that the only problem was, instead of my left side, it affected my right side, so I still have a little desensitization and a little problems with controlling my right hand. My left side, I got partial paralysis on the left side of my face and arm, shoulder, and hand, and that, but causes a little discomfort and that. But I manage. I get along pretty well, and fortunately, I can still see some, and with enough magnification, I can even read a little bit. And I did have cataract surgery here a little over a year ago, I guess, which actually did improve my vision some. And hopefully, maybe there's more can be done at some point. I don't know.
I noticed earlier in today's hearing, I noticed your hand kind of shaking a little bit, kind of trembling. Is that a typical thing that you have?
Yeah, I've got Parkinson's disease. Yeah, I take medication for it, but I still, the medication has taken the tremors pretty much away, the sudden jerking and tremors and that, but I still have some shaking, and particularly if I am tired, get a little tired, and unfortunately, I'll admit that I didn't sleep real well or a lot last night, and so maybe a little bit tired today. But yeah, the medication's not doing quite the job this morning that it normally does.
No, that's fair enough. I know this process can be stressful, and I'm not surprised to hear you maybe didn't sleep so well last night. So, okay. And the last thing I just want to ask you about, you said you kind of manage okay. So when you are walking around the facility, when you're getting around the facility, what does that look like for you? How well do you get around if you're moving?
Well, I get around quite well. I do use a guide cane. That's mostly though because I have no peripheral vision and some depth perception problems, and that's so I use that. So I don't walk into something or bump into somebody. I have a little depth perception problem and that, but otherwise I still get around quite well. And then of course I'm very familiar with the facility here as well. So I don't count steps anymore, but I know where doorways are and how many doorways between points, and yeah. So I get around quite well.
Okay. All right. Well, fair enough. Well, thank you for talking to me about those things. I appreciate that. Let me see if Ms. Kuklinski has any questions for you about health.
Just on that same exact note, so you don't have anybody assigned to you or anything that helps you to get from your cell to the chow hall or to the places that you need to go to in the institution?
No. In fact, for a number of years, I was that person. I worked for about 9 years as what they call special needs medical orderly, and I was that person that helped the other people. And here, a couple of years ago or so now, it's been 2-3 years ago now, they decided that I am what they consider an ADA participant or person, and say that you know I'm the person that may be qualified or be required to have that individual to help me. So they can no longer let me continue to be a medical orderly myself, but I have nobody assigned. I don't need anybody to help getting around or anything like that.
Okay. And so you're able to manage your own daily needs, like using the bathroom, showering, that sort of thing without assistance?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. And then it sounds like, you have the use of your, I can't remember what you called it, your cane that you use your site cane in order to kind of get around the facility. And it sounds like maybe at one point you did count steps. Do you have any concerns at all with your ability to kind of navigate a new environment? And have you thought about kind of what that would look like?
I don't have any concerns about being able to get around. No, I mean, I think maybe that's the misconception with the idea of the difference between being 100% blind or 100%, or as they call it, and being legally blind. Being legally blind doesn't mean that I'm unable to see things and focus and get around. Like I say, I can even read with enough magnification, the bright glasses and magnifying glass. I can still read.
Okay. I appreciate that clarification. That's really helpful. I don't have any other questions for this topic. Thank you, sir, and I will check in with Mr. Reese.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Okay, thank you both. Mr. NULPH, I did not have any questions for you about your disciplinary history. Again, that's historical information that I'm well aware of. I do just want to take a moment to acknowledge you for your many, many years of disciplinary-free conduct in the institution. That is recognized and seen by the board, and I just wanted to take a moment to just let you know that we see that and we acknowledge you for that, okay?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Kuklinski or Mr. Reese, any questions about disciplinary conduct?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Nor do I. Thanks.
Okay, thank you both. All right, so I do have some questions for you, Mr. NULPH, about your programming history and reformation activities. You know, the first thing I just want to recognize is you have engaged in a lot of programming over your time in custody throughout the many years you've been there. I mean, it covers a page and a half in your materials, and I just want you to know that is also recognized. I have some specific questions for you about specific things you've done. So I want to start by asking you, just generally speaking, I'm curious, when you think about what empathy means, what does it mean to you to have empathy for another human being?
The empathy, well, interestingly enough, one of the programs, many programs that I've taken was with Craig Plunkett, a man who lost his son to murder. And Craig was here at OSCI offering an empathy and forgiveness class. And it was through his class that I began to recognize the kind of things, the effect that my crimes had on individuals and how they made people feel and the harm that it did. And as Davis mentioned, Kim Christians, now Kim Hanna, the daughter of Miss Christians, who I murdered in 1976. When Kim first wrote me, I knew that I wanted to respond to her letter and the questions that she asked, but I wasn't quite certain how to do that. And there was fortunately a man here at OSCI that I knew from OSP that had worked with victims' rights groups there. And so I asked Mark about answering the letter, and he introduced me to Craig. And Craig helped me, and Mark helped me navigate through the process of responding to Kim, and that with the dignity and respect that she deserved, and to give her those answers. And then through that process, through Craig's class, and speaking with Kim, I come to understand the idea of empathy and remorse for the actions that I did, and feeling the pain that Kim felt and that family members have felt and friends have felt, and that for the things that I've done and how that reflected and affected them, reflected on them and affected them. And empathy is, for me, it is that feeling their pain and understanding that pain that I caused.
Mm-hmm. Good morning, everybody. I'm replying to your messages, but they're not
All right,
popping
thank you
up.
very much. I want to talk to you about specifically what you've learned from your studies in treatment, because you did actually get some sex offender treatment programming in the past.
No.
So I want to ask you a little bit about some things you might have learned from that. So can you tell me, what have you learned about yourself, about why you think you have a history of engaging in rape and sexual abuse? Where do you think that comes from for you?
That's a combination of some things related first directly to the anger that I felt with regards to my parents' divorce. It goes back to when I was 10 years old when they got divorced, and not understanding that, and the anger that I felt towards my mother for having divorced my father and taking me away from that relationship with him. And then, of course, later, my own wife, Mary Ann, divorcing me, and I feeling like how she put our daughters in the same position that I felt like I was in at 10 years old. And they're not going to be able to have a father figure like they should have had. And then my own problems with feelings of inadequacy and failure. You know, my failure to follow the dreams that I had as a growing up, you know, going to college, playing football, and doing more than that possibly. And my failure then to, as being a Marine, I had enlisted in the United States Marine Corps and intended to make that a career, and was not even able to finish my enlistment term because of my hearing loss. And then the biggest thing as a failure being a husband and father, and the anger that those things caused in me. And so, unfortunately, I directed that anger misguidedly at women, maybe because of Marianne and my mother and that problem. And then also, although I thought for a long time that it was just all about sex, through the therapy, and particularly with Miss Callahan in this last one group that I belonged to, recognizing that it was more about the power and control issues, and that I felt that I failed it so much and I had no control in things in my life that I took control. It was a control matter. And as wrong as that was, it was in that jumbled or distortedness of my mind somehow made things sensible in a sense, but it was just about power and control and feeling like I finally had some control in my life that I hadn't had before.
What do you guys think?
Okay,
Are you guys buying this?
When you talk about power and control and directing that anger at women that you had, so that came out in you choosing to sexually assault and in one case murder a woman. So was it the act of the sexual assault, the act of the murder, that you felt like you regained power and control in that moment? Is that kind of what you're referring to?
As senseless as that is, that's correct. Yeah, and that's most senseless. Those things kind of worked like that. I thought I was gaining control when I really, by doing the things I do, I was completely out of control. It made absolutely no sense in that respect. But yes, you're right that somehow by doing those things, I felt like I was in control finally of something in my life. And it was a power issue, feeling that I was finally the one with the power and control. It wasn't my mother or Marianne or, the Marine Corps and discharge. It wasn't my, I was finally getting some control of things. And that, like I say, as crazy and distorted as that is, that's what I was thinking and feeling at the time.
Man, he should have
So
gone.
do you feel like you blamed women for all the things that you were unhappy with, or that anger that you had? Was there like a thought you had that women were responsible for that in your life?
I think I directed that towards women, just like I say, because of my mother's actions and Marianne's actions and the divorces. But it wasn't, I don't think a women issue. It was
No, not at all.
that I directed it in that way. for those reasons, but I don't blame, I certainly don't blame them now for the things that I did at all.
Yeah, I guess that's what I want to understand is what you've learned about why you think you directed all that anger at women. Have you figured that out at all? Why you think you targeted women specifically? Why that anger was directed at women? Do you have an idea?
Because you couldn't try that with a man.
Well, yes, I say it was because I was directing it toward my mother, toward Mary Ann, and women in general, unfortunately, were just the target, and that for that anger. And had it been something else, or could have been directed, I could have directed it in a different fashion, maybe if I had felt more anger towards somebody or something else. I mean, if I could, I guess, maybe been angry at the Marine Corps and directed all that anger somehow towards authority, but I didn't, and I suspect that it was because first situation was that divorce between my mother and my father, and then compounded by Mary Ann's divorce of me that unfortunately was directed all towards women and not anybody else.
I'm curious, have you learned inside yourself, if you're thinking about future parole, like what kinds of things would you need to avoid, or what kinds of triggers could you face that you'd have to deal with that could lead you potentially to engaging in sexual assault again? Have you figured out what you have to avoid to make sure that doesn't happen?
That's a good question right there.
Castration?
Castration?
That I have to recognize it, where the feelings of aloneness and disappointment, that as those things that arose or arise, that I didn't never deal with appropriately, that now when they do, I seek out someone that I can talk with about that. And I mean, there's several things that I realize that I need to avoid, and that being, first of all, the withdrawal within myself. And if I ever start feeling like I'm not in control of things and start withdrawing, that I need to immediately talk to somebody about that and what I'm feeling and experiencing. And I've done that over the years.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. NULPH, I just want to let you know some of what you just talked about, I think, is kind of connected to what the psychologist and you talked about. So I'm going to follow up a little bit later on with some of that, okay, when we start talking about that evaluation. I noticed that you've re-engaged first with recovery support groups. I think it was NA or AA, and then you went to Celebrate Recovery. I'm just curious, what have you been getting out of participating in those programs?
Getting out of the what?
Out of your participation in recovery support groups like AA, NA, Celebrate Recovery, like what have you been getting out of participating in those?
AA for me, I participated in AA for my first 3 years of my incarceration, And unfortunately, the thing that always bothered me, I went to AA and I continually hear guys say that, oh, the drugs or the alcohol made me do this and caused me to do that. And I always thought that was so wrong because I thought the alcohol didn't make me do anything. I chose to drink, and alcohol may have lowered my inhibitions, but I was the one who chose to do the things that I did. And so I quit going to AA for a number of years. In 2020, one of the board members asked me specifically why I didn't go to AA, and it seemed to cause some concerns for him that I did go to AA. So after the denial of my parole, I asked to get back on the turnout to go to AA, and unfortunately, it took over 2 years on a waiting list to be able to go to an AA meeting here. And then I was going to AA, and in 2023, when I went to the hospital, I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. And they have a rule about if you miss 2 meetings in a row, they remove you from AA call out. So I was taken off of that. And that's when I began going to Celebrating Recovery, which I find personally much more satisfying in that it's the respect that the men that I go to Celebrating Recovery with all recognize and know their personal power. They recognize and believe in Jesus Christ as their personal power. And it isn't a question of, who that is or what it is, that we know that our personal power is in Christ. And we can openly share with one another our shortcomings and the problems that we have had because we have chosen to either drink or use drugs or whatever the addiction is. And
are these circles?
Even in Celebrating Recovery, even beyond that,
is making me want to drink.
Talk about whether it's a sexual addiction or a addiction with whatever it might be, their anger or whatever the situation may be, we can speak with one another, share with one another more openly about that, and not blaming anything, drugs or alcohol or anybody, but ourselves for our own actions and the things that we've done wrong.
It's like you want some power.
So it sounds like you really like the kind of personal accountability piece of Celebrate Recovery. Is that fair?
That's very fair. That's the thing. One of the big differences between AA and Celebrated Recovery that I recognize, at least, is the accepting of the responsibility of yourself for whatever your problem is or whatever it is you've done.
And I just don't remember off the top of my head if this was in your parole plan or not, but is Celebrate Recovery something you want to continue doing if released?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I hope that there will always, and from what I've been told by the sponsors who come in for Celebrating Recovery, they can be found in nearly every large city, certainly, and in a lot of the smaller communities, even Celebrating Recovery is available. And I certainly would hope to be able to continue to go to Celebrating Recovery.
Well, I can tell you that Celebrate Recovery has become more and more popular over time, and so there are absolutely a lot of Celebrate Recovery groups out there to find. So it's absolutely something you can find. So my one last question for you on this topic, Mr. NULPH, is can you just tell me what have you learned in all of your programming about what your triggers specifically for alcohol use are, and what you would need to avoid in the community. Have you given some thought to that?
My triggers are watching
yeah.
stuff like this. That triggers me.
The triggers have always been the disappointment, discouragement. Whenever, well, for example, when I started drinking when I was 10 years old, when my parents divorced, I didn't recognize at the time why I was doing that, and that other than it made me feel good, and I could forget about those other things, the problems of my parents' divorce and worrying about that, and whether I was a problem and fault for their divorce and all those things. And then every time a disappointment came up, I drank more and more. And Marianne and I got divorced. I drank more and more.
Damn you,
It didn't
Marianne.
seem possible at the time, but I did continue to drink more heavily. After our divorce, even when I got involved in a second relationship, my drinking continued to get worse because those failures that I felt had accumulated on me. And even though I say in a new relationship, and I still felt like such a failure, disappointment about my divorce with Marianne and the not being able to fulfill my Marine enlistment and continue that. And I recognize that those kinds of things were things that caused me to rely on alcohol to try to forget or somehow cope with them. And now, rather than choosing to go to use alcohol, I have learned that I need to go see somebody. I need to talk with somebody about it, share with somebody those feelings. And sometimes the disappointment is justified. A lot of times it's really not. It's not like it's the end of the world kind of situation. And people can help me see through that.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. NULPH. That covers the questions I have for you on this topic. So let me see if Ms. Kuklinski has any questions for you on your programming and reformation activities.
Thank you. Mr. NULPH, I did have a couple follow-up questions. So I appreciate you kind of talking about where you believe that your I guess the root causes of your hostile views of women came from between the divorce and then your parents' divorce and then the divorce between you and Marianne. I'm wondering though, as I understand it, your sexual assault of Marianne occurred prior to the divorce from Marianne. And so I'm wondering, and at that point, your parents obviously had divorced many years prior. But at the time, were there other contributing factors that you kind of consider contributing towards your sexual assault of Marianne?
I think the first one that you're speaking of occurred in 1973.
The first one?
And that was during a drunken episode when I was stopped for driving under the influence in the State Highway Patrol in North Carolina called the military police, and they drove my car and myself to our home where Marianne and I were staying. And sometime that night, I guess, that assault occurred. And I have never recalled that.
Oh, yeah.
Having committed that assault, but I never doubted Marianne when she said that I did do those things. And were there problems? Well, there was probably just a problem that she was not happy with the fact that I had enlisted in the Marine Corps, and was not really supportive of that. And the sense of her lack of support may have been a factor. And of course, then I said, having gotten the driving under the influence at that time, there may have been arguments going on about that too, that I responded to irrationally and acting out the way I did.
So at the time of the sexual assault of Marianne, your relationship was, you were struggling within that relationship already. There was conflict. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, there was conflict in that. Like I say, strangely enough, when I enlisted, the Marine Corps recruiting officer said, well, he had to meet with me and my wife because she would have to understand what we were involving ourselves in by my enlistment. And he came to our home and sat down with us and spoke to us, explained to Marianne that it meant that to begin with, I'd be going off to boot camp and be away for 3 months in boot camp. And then after boot camp, there would be another year or so that I'd be going to schooling and training, and which time that the Marine Corps recommended that would not be a wise or good time for husbands and wives to try to get together because of things that would be going on then. And through all of that, when the recruiting officer came time to ask if there were any questions or anything, Marianne never asked a single question. But after when I went down and for my physical and swearing in, after I was sworn into the Marine Corps, she told me that she would have never ever taken the oath that I took. We had very different political views and positions, and she didn't support my decision, even though she never questioned the recruiting officer about any of it. She never supported my position to enlist in the Marine Corps. And even though it was suggested that the kind of hardships that she would be faced with during that first year of my enlistment, after I was transferred to Millington, Tennessee for schooling, for aviation training, she joined me there a few weeks later, and quite to my surprise, I didn't know that she intended to do that, but she did. Yeah, so there was tension, there was problems going on in our marriage prior to that assault. Yes.
And were you angry with her about feeling like she didn't support you in your military?
I'm certain there's a certain amount of anger that accompanied the disappointment that she didn't support that. Yes.
And was that something that you as a couple regularly thought about or had verbal disagreement about?
Well, I think one of the biggest problems for Marianne and I were always a lack of communication in that between us. We did not communicate well or discuss well these things. that she, when like her disappointment or her not agreeing with my or supporting my enlistment, and that we didn't discuss those things. And then I think for me at least, it's been the thing that's helped me the most through the years, to recognize the fact that I've not been a good communicator in the past, and I didn't at times like that seek out someone to talk about those things. I didn't have friends or family that I felt like I could go to at that time to talk about those things, and Marianne, I didn't talk about them. So yeah, there was definitely a problem with that, our communicating.
So is it fair to say that those feelings or emotions were bottled up for you?
Yeah.
You never expressed them. Okay. Okay. One of the things that was mentioned in the last hearing, actually in the last board action form, was what was perceived as your continued need to seek control over others. And I'm wondering what you think that's related to. What do you think they meant by that?
Like continuing control over?
You continue to seek control over other people.
I'm not certain exactly to any specifics that they were referring to at that time. I think that related to the crimes and things that I've come to understand and recognize that was a big issue, was control that I was seeking. That, you know, so historically, that would be one of the things that would be recognized. I think that they might refer to that I have that control issue, and as far as specifics as to continuing that, I'm not certain what it would be that they would be referring to, and
okay.
and I don't think, and certainly hope I'm not continuing that kind of behavior. It's not something that I want to do or be recognized as.
Well, I guess I want to explore it a little bit, because in May of 2023, you wrote a letter to your daughter, and contained within that letter was a letter to Marianne. And I would just like to better understand what your intentions were behind writing that letter. Because from what I understand, Marianne had set some pretty clear boundaries, indicating that she didn't want to have any contact from you in any way, shape, or form. So can you just kind of help me understand what your intent was?
Yes, certainly. At the time I wrote that letter to Marianne in 2023, after I just gotten out of the hospital, and I was going through kind of a rough time. I was still in recovery from that period, 3 weeks in the hospital. And I was doing some reflecting on my life, the things that I've done and were sorry for, and things that Marianne and I have never ever talked about, or as I said, we didn't communicate well about. And I was, for myself, looking for some closure in some things, to be able to tell her how sorry I was for our failed marriage and things that I had done to cause that failure. And I also was aware that, having been a psychology student, that there are phases and cycles of life that we go through, and Marianne and I were both at that age and place where in the cycle of life you begin reflecting on past life events and things that you feel good about or that you don't feel so good about. And I thought that possibly there were still things too that Marianne would have liked to have maybe gotten some closure on. So
Now
that was my intent for writing.
He's thinking
is
for
to
Marianne now. How
hopefully
Marianne
open
wants some
a
closure.
line of communication or offer a line of communication if she desired to have any and find some closure.
Like Marianne
And,
doesn't know where he's at.
I sent the letter not to Marianne but to our daughter, so that if Marianne had chose, when Stephanie said, "Hey, I got a letter here from Dad, and he's addressed to you," Marianne could have just as easily said, "Hey, I don't want any communication with him, don't want to see the letter, tear it up, throw it away, or whatever." And she obviously didn't do that. She chose to get the letter and to read it. And the fact that even though in 2010 when she wrote to me and said the things that she said about no further communication with our children and her, that in spite of that, she got on my visiting list.
Mm-hmm.
And was on my visiting list. And though she never came to see me in 2016 or 17 when she somehow applied electronically, I guess they can apply electronically to get on a person's visiting list. She never didn't ever come to see me, but she was on my visiting list.
Who cares what she did?
I was under the impression that possibly there was reason for her to want to have some kind of communication. And I didn't know why. Maybe she had gotten to that place where there were things that she needed to say or wanted to say. And maybe it was only to vent more how angry she really was. And had those feelings of anger that she wanted to still express. And that would have been fine. And it would have been fine if that was all she wanted to do in response to the letter that I wrote to her. But the purpose of that was not to somehow manipulate her or get some kind of control on her, but was to just simply possibly open a line of communication for some closure for myself and maybe for her, and to finally, hopefully, maybe just put everything behind us.
So so she wrote you in 2010 saying, "I don't want to have any kind of communication." And what year did she get on your visitors list?
She got on my visiting list, and I don't recall the exact date, but Miss Davis has a copy of the visiting list that Marianne's on. It was in.
This was from May 2017. It looks like at that time, certainly she had been approved as of the date that this was printed. So,
okay, thank you for that clarification.
Sorry, yeah.
So then 3 years goes by, and you decide to then write her a letter. I mean, I've heard you say that you were hoping to gain some closure.
Screw your closure.
I mean, now I guess in reflection and seeing what Marianne had to say to the board, do you consider this letter more self-serving than anything else?
No, I recognize now that I overstepped some boundaries that she felt were in place and that I shouldn't have overstepped. And I didn't see it as well, given her reaction to it. Yeah, it was more self-serving evidently for myself and hoping for closure for myself than than what she was willing or wanted. So yeah, I can see where, yeah, it'd be more self-serving in that respect. And that, though that was not my intent.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know how much step work you've done. Have you done any kind of step work in AA or NA? Have you worked through the steps at all?
Of course not. He's not an alcoholic.
Step work. Have you ever heard of like the 12 steps of recovery? Have you worked through the 12 steps of recovery at all in AA or NA?
Oh yes, the 12 step.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And
so I think
it's one you're trying to make amends with individuals, with the exception of where it may cause more problems or harm than good. Yes.
Right.
And yeah, for me personally, the sobriety I've always found much easier than working the steps themselves. Those are the tough parts of AA or celebrating recovery. The steps are the difficult part, where you have to start being completely honest with yourself and go through those things.
Do you think you considered that reaching out to Marianne could cause her more harm than it could, cause good?
In hindsight, I certainly do now, yes. And like I say, at the time, I didn't, given the fact that she had gotten on my visiting list, and I saw that as possibly a sign of that there was something that she had to say or wanted to say, and that between my desire for closure, that maybe she also had some desire for that. Recognize now with her reaction to the letter that was not the case, and I did what I would do now in that situation when I received a copy from the board of her letter, and the disappointment that caused for me. I called and spoke with my sister about it. I got some wisdom from an older sister that I wish I'd reached out for before writing and sending a letter. And my sister said that, having known both Marianne and I from childhood and during our marriage and through our divorce and that, and just explaining to me that, those are things that I should have and I need and have to just, give up, get over them, and put them aside and move beyond them. And so that's what I've chosen at this point to do. It's just, unfortunately, thinking that closure may never occur for me, and that's something I'm just going to have to live with and get beyond.
Well, and so what, this happens all the time, right? Where people that you or that individuals have victimized, it would cause them more harm to actually reach out to them and talk to them. So in what ways can you demonstrate, remorse and gain closure without actually having that conversation with Marianne? Because I don't want there to be any kind of concern that you're going to continue to try to reach out to her, especially if you were to get released, right? I wouldn't want her to feel like she always has to be looking over her shoulder.
Yes. The remorse, I'm not certain how that can be shown other than by saying now how sorry I am, and I wish that I'd never done the things that I had done and never hurt her in the way that I've hurt her. The assurance that I won't be attempting to make any contact with her is only the word that I can give. Is that I realize that it's not something that's ever going to happen. And in the same respect with my children, who I hope eventually will see me as an individual that's not the monster that I was, and that did the things that I did that caused me to be where I am today, and that they will start be able to recognize and see a person that maybe that they had always hoped that I would be, and that I could be the father or grandfather or great grandfather now that I am, and that they be a person that they may choose to have a relationship with. But I understand too that they have complete control over that. I don't have any control over that other than the life that I will lead when I am released. That I hope people everywhere, not just my children, but all people will see that I am a person that they don't have to be concerned about. And rather, I'm a person that they could depend on and would like to get to know and be around. But to say how I can assure Mary Ann or my daughters or anybody else about that they have no worry or need to worry about me trying to contact them, other than to say I won't. I don't know at this point, how else to express that.
Okay. Well, and I heard you say it, and I'm just gonna, I guess, reiterate it here, that just the importance of letting them drive that ship and drive that communication, and that despite your overwhelming desires to have that relationship with your ex-wife and your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, that desire can't be at the expense of the feelings of your daughters and your ex-wife.
That's correct. Yeah, I guess any of us that are parents would know or understand the feeling of wanting to have a shared relationship with our children and that. But I understand and know that I'm not the one that has control over that. I have respected that in the sense of I haven't written directly to my daughters or to my granddaughter, and with the exception of this letter in 2023 that I wrote to Mary Ann, I've not tried to make any contact with any of them, and I won't as long as they continue to express that they don't want to have that contact. Although my daughters have never personally made that expression to me, that it was Mary Ann that did in 2010, said that they didn't want to have any contact. But I reflected that, in spite of the on again, off again relationship that my youngest daughter Stephanie and I have had, whenever she has chosen to not write or visit, when she stopped after 1992, when she introduced me to my granddaughter and visited for a while, and we corresponded. When she stopped visiting, stopped corresponding, I did as well, and didn't have any contact with her again until many, many years later when I had my strokes. And I wrote to Stephanie and thought that Stephanie and Sherry had the right to know what was going on with me health-wise, and particularly since Dr. Muhammad said that the cancer that I have is a hereditary thing, and I thought they had the right to know the medical history and that existed. And when Stephanie and I started writing again in 2008 and wrote from 2008 to 2010 until Mary Ann wrote and told me not to write anymore. And I haven't written directly to them since then. And all I can say is, I'll respect that. If they ever do choose to want to reach out, I'll always be there. I love my children, and I'll always be available, but that'll be their choice as to whether or not that relationship ever occurs.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any additional questions or follow-up on this topic, so I'll check in with Mr. Reese.
Thank you. I do have a couple of follow-up questions, starting with something Mr. Bailey asked you about, which was triggers for alcohol abuse. And you said disappointments, and you mentioned some of the historical disappointments in your life. What types of disappointments do you foresee you might encounter or experience if released back into the community?
There's perhaps disappointments in not getting a job that I might like to get. I hope to be able to continue to work upon my release.
You ain't getting no job. Knock it off.
I recognize it. There are places that, given my background and history, are places that might choose not to hire me because of that. That could be disappointing. Housing, and that I'm aware of, that there's restrictions on those sorts of things, and that could be disappointing. Could be disappointing that at some point that, I feel like, well, I've done all of this and maybe I've been doing really good, and my children still choose to have a relationship. There certainly would be disappointment in that. There's those kind of disappointments that often would have maybe been causes for me to decide, well, boy, I just need a drink. Now I know I don't need a drink and don't want to drink. And I didn't like the person that I became when I was drinking, and choose not to ever be that person again. So those are all kinds of, all things could be triggers that would have maybe caused me before to drink or chose to drink. And I've chosen not to, and I won't at that time. If those sorts of things occurred, if I was denied a job or housing or someone that I chose to think that I wanted to have a friendship with, then no, absolutely not. Those kind of things could be triggers that would have in the past caused me to drink, and I suspect that I'll face and might possibly face and upon release, and that I'll have to be aware of.
Do you believe that the programming you've gone through has given you a full understanding of why you committed your crimes?
I think so, yes. I think there's always more to be learned about myself and others in the things that I've done. There's never a time where I feel like I got it all, that I know everything, because I don't think that there is. I hope to always be learning and understanding better, and that to myself, and having a better understanding of the things that I've done, and that so that I'll be more aware of those, and certainly not to ever have it happen again.
Regarding your concept that there was a transference of anger about your mother and Mary Ann to other women, leading you to murder a woman and rape a woman. Did someone tell you that, or did you come to that conclusion on your own?
I came to the conclusion on my own, like I said, better understood that it was a power issue and controlling, and I think there's the fallacy that it always reverts back to your childhood and either your mother or father sort of thing, and people are told that all the time. And I suspect that, yeah, maybe in the beginning when I first started going through those programs, that was suggested, that, well, you need to look at that, and as that being the cause and the reason. And of course I did, and never wanted to accept or believe that, because my mother, frankly, was my very best friend and greatest supporter all the time, all of my life, until her death. And so it was very, very difficult for me to accept the fact that that was the beginning of where my anger started, and that it was directed towards her. It was very difficult for me to come to that point of saying that was the first root cause. And it was even more difficult for me to sit down with my mother years and years later and for us to discuss that and how I felt and the anger I had for her and towards her, and to share that with her, and for us to come to an understanding together about it, and for me to get a better understanding of why she did what she did in divorcing my father. So yeah, it wasn't anybody telling me. It was finally me coming to understand and recognizing that, yeah, that was the first source of my anger, was my mother's and father's divorce. And directing it towards women, I was the one that recognized it. That was why I was doing that, is taking my anger out on others. It's the female persuasion, because of my anger that was wrongly directed towards my mother and Mary Ann.
Okay, and certainly divorce can be very upsetting for a child. You also mentioned your Marine Corps service didn't take you to the point you were hoping, and you mentioned your dream of playing professional football also being unrealized. Do you think that you had a normal response or reaction to those disappointments?
Normal? By no means normal. I mean, there's lots and lots of, unfortunately, lots and lots of divorces, and children have to go through divorces. They never do the things that I did. And there's, the thousands and thousands of young men that grew up with the dreams I did of, playing football and maybe becoming a professional football player. The thousands of college athletes every year, that out of those thousands, just a few actually make it into professional football. And so, yeah, do they respond and react the way I do or did? Yeah, no. And the disappointments in my own divorce in that, well, there's lots of people that get divorced every year, and they're not all going out and committing crimes and doing the things that I did. So no, there was nothing natural or normal about that at all. And my response was,
yeah, and you said earlier when you were talking with Mr. Bailey that it was a crazy and distorted response. So what, if anything, has programming taught you about why you had a pathological or abnormal response to what you just said are really kind of ordinary disappointments that someone might experience as they're growing up?
I don't think there's been any specific answers to identifying exactly why. And unfortunately, I don't know that we'll ever get to that point where the community, psychological community, professional community will be able to explain exactly why individuals act out pathologically or sociologically. If we did have an answer exactly why, then we could solve the problem of correction. We wouldn't need them anymore. And that, in my case, I don't think, nobody said, well, this is why that you did these things, why you're, something in your mind is different, responded differently than anybody else's. It's just unfortunately that it did. And it taken me a while to understand that the fact that the things that I did could have been totally avoided if at the time I recognized that I'm feeling the way I was feeling or thinking the way I was thinking about doing anything bad. And like I say now, when I begin to have feelings of discomfort in that respect, or like the disappointment I had when I received a copy of Marianne's letter, thinking I need to talk to somebody about that. And so I did. I reached out and I talked to somebody about it.
Well, to circle back to where we were, I asked you if you believe programming has given you a full understanding of why you committed your crimes, and you said yes. But ultimately, it seems as if you don't have a full understanding of why you reacted the way that you did, as you just said.
I understood the programs that I've had to help me to understand that I did things that I did because I was attempting to somehow rein in that loss of control, that feeling of loss of control of my life spinning out of control. When I didn't accomplish doing any of the things that I wanted to do. I became a failure as a father, as a husband, as a Marine, and I was attempting to take control of things. In that respect, yes, they explained to me why I did the things I did, and that it totally unreasonably acting the way I did by doing the things which somehow I manufactured a feeling of control with. So yeah, it was a control issue and a lack of control for why I did the things that I did. And I understand that. I understand that that's why I acted out the way I did. And programs have made me realize that. It made me realize the fact that really I have very little control over anything other than the fact that how I respond now to those feelings. And I can control that by sharing my feelings and thoughts and talking with others.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nulph, for answering my questions.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Nulph, we're about to take a break. We've got 3 more topics to cover, so I am anticipating that this may be our only break. So just so you know that, we might not take another break. So if you need to take care of any personal business during this break, please do. Before we go to break, I just want to close the loop on something. Can I just give you some feedback? Did you hear Mr. Nulph? Is it okay if I give you some feedback?
Yes, please.
Okay, just want to make sure you're receptive to what I'm about to tell you. So, tell me if you think this is fair. Decision to contact Miss Colby. Bad decision. Fair?
Absolutely fair. Very bad.
Yep.
Horrible.
Good. We're on the same page. All right. So what I want to just let you know, because I have the opportunity to tell you this today, so I want to make sure this is completely in the open.
I need a break. You guys need a break.
If the board moves forward with your release, we know you have harmed significantly Miss Colby. And so I would expect that the board would probably give you a no contact order with Miss Colby. Right? So if the board gives you that no contact order, if you contact her, you would be in violation of your parole, and the parole board could return you to prison. Do you understand that?
Absolutely understood.
Okay. I just want to make sure that's clear, that if we move forward with parole, you just expect that you're probably going to get a no contact with her. So my encouragement to you is to consider from this moment forward that you just are not going to have contact with her. Okay?
Understood.
Okay. All right. Just making sure that's clear. So let's go ahead and take a break. It's 10:27.
Yep, we need a break.
Again, this might be our only break, and I know it's possible you might need a little more time, Mr. Nulph. So we'll take a 13-minute break. We'll come back on the record at 10:40. For folks that are on video and on phone, just know that if you unmute, we would still be able to hear everything you say. The recording's going to be stopped, but we can still hear folks. So I would just encourage folks to stay muted during the break. Thank you all very much. And again, we'll come back at 10:40.
Okay. Hey, so those of you guys that are listening in right now, I'm going to play something for you guys so you guys could hear. Back like in the 70s, for some reason, they let him out. They should have not let him out. And within 2 months of him getting out, he ended up, offending. And here we are now in 2024. So I'll put it up right now. Let me go ahead and cue it up right here. You guys let me know if you guys could hear, and I'll play it for the people on both platforms right now. So just let me get ready. And I'll play it right now if I could find it. Let me see where I put it. Let me see here. Just bear with me here a moment, and I'll play it right now. Let me see, is it this one? Is it this one? No. So what do you guys think? Do you guys think that they should let him out? What are you guys' feelings on this? I think it might be this one right here. Oh yeah, this is it right here. Let me put it up for people so you guys can see here. Window capture. Is it this one? No. Hold on. News. I gotta move it up one. Nope. Hold on. Hold on. I'm having some technical difficulties over here getting it on the screen for you guys. Yup, right here. Let me alright, so I'm gonna play it right now. You guys should be able to hear it, hopefully. Or maybe not. Let's see where the volume is at.
The State Parole Board has deferred the potential release of convicted murderer and rapist George NULPH for 2 years. The Parole Board concluded, based on a doctor's report and diagnosis, that NULPH suffers from a severe emotional disturbance and is a danger to the community. NULPH was convicted in 1976 of murder and kidnapping in the abduction of Frances Christians in Cannon Beach. He was sentenced to life in prison, but, under a new sentencing system, he was released in 1986. NULPH brutally raped a Portland woman shortly after his release and was sent back to prison. The Oregon Board of Parole and Post-Prison Supervision ruled on NULPH's murder and sodomy convictions after holding a parole hearing in January. Michael DeMunes, a Portland attorney who represented NULPH before the Parole Board, declined to comment. Clatsop County District Attorney Josh Marquis had argued against parole for NULPH at the January hearing. While I'm gratified that the Parole Board recognized NULPH did not deserve release, the fact he served less than 10 years on a life sentence is outrageous, Marquis said in an email. If the Department of Corrections had not released him on leave, he would not have been able to rape an 18-year-old woman in Portland. This case languished without any action for over 25 years, and while the members of the current Parole Board bear no responsibility for failures of previous boards, NULPH should serve the rest of his life in prison. Now my office and Multnomah County DA's office will need to notify the victims again, and in 2 years we are likely to repeat this process.
That is, that's pretty outrageous, you know, because this totally could have been avoided, and here we are. There was another one that I found here. Let me play it for you guys if I could find it here. Somewhere on here. Oh, yeah, I think it's this one here. Let's see.
Sent to prison twice for violent crimes, is trying to get out on parole.
In the 1970s, George NULPH kidnapped and murdered a mother on the coast. He served time for that, was let out of prison, and within weeks, new violent crimes here in the Portland area. Amy Frazier joins us with a preview of tomorrow's parole hearing. Amy?
Well, George NULPH has spent most of his life in prison. The 64-year-old argues he's no longer a danger to the community. However, the district attorneys where he committed his crimes are fighting to keep him locked up.
In 1976, Frances Christians was on her way home from work in Cannon Beach to her 2 young children when she was abducted by George NULPH, who kidnapped her, sexually assaulted her, and then shot her execution style.
George William NULPH was given a life sentence for murder in 1976 for crimes that shocked the small beachside community in Clatsop County.
And less than 10 years later, the Department of Corrections gave him a, quote, temporary leave and simply let him out of prison.
Less than 2 months later, NULPH committed sex crimes in Multnomah County.
The reason Measure 11 passed, the reason we developed even moderately tough on crime laws in the 1990s was because of of cases like NULPH's.
In 1987, a judge sentenced NULPH to a minimum of 80 years in prison for the sex crimes. But later that year, the parole board reviewed his sentence, deemed it excessive, and reduced it, making him eligible for parole now.
I mean, one can make an argument, I suppose, that the man has done, 30 years in prison for the rapes, which was the minimum that he was sentenced. So, why not give him a chance to, show that he's in fact rehabilitated himself?
But he says, remember this, 10 years before the sex crimes,
he had stalked, kidnapped, and murdered a woman, and that sort of just popped out of existence because it was lost by the institutional memory of the state of Oregon.
According to court documents, part of NULPH's fight to get a parole hearing, NULPH says the antisocial personality disorder that made him dangerous is in remission. And the parole hearing is tomorrow morning in Salem. We're told that a decision could take some time. We'll let you know what happens. Jeff?
Amy, thank you. And be sure to check out coin.com for kidnapped and murder a mother on the coast. She served time for that, was let out.
What I say is this. I say, all right, cool. Hey, we'll give him another 30, because they gave him 80 years. So we'll let him out at 60. And then I think that would be fair, right? Give him another 30. He'll probably be like 100 and something. Because he's like, 74? He'll be like 104. I think that'll be a good age for him to parole at. I don't know what you guys think. I mean, I think that's fair. He's done a large, by that time he already done a large portion of his sentence. He'll get out 20 years early. He doesn't do the full 80. So I think that's, I would say that's fair. I don't know, but I don't know what you guys think, but anyhow, so we're just, hey, Rhonda, how's it? Oh, yeah. So hold on. Let me, I haven't been shouting you guys out. I've been responding to the messages, but for some reason they're not popping up. So I'm assuming you guys are not getting them. So we got Rhonda in the chat. We got cool, build cool things. We got Snow. We got Jessica _. Let me see. We got Drea, Breezy 444 coming in from Portland, Oregon. Where's everybody tapping in from? If you guys don't mind sharing. We got Nisha. Let me see who else do we got in here. We got Cali-213 or 213. We got Figs Gaming. We got Whitney. We got Life's Peachy. That's right. And we see we got Evelyn Tales. Crazy Casey. Sheen Gators. We got JX Low. Let me see. We got Debbie. We got Riska 187 coming in from Louisiana. That's right. Let me see here. Who else do we got in here? Is that it? Is that all the messages? Okay, that's as far as I can go up. So, all right. So let me see who else we got. We got Cha coming in from California. We got Nisha coming in from Arizona. We got Build Cool Things coming in from New York. We got Gene Bean coming in from Iowa. We got Drea coming in from California, if you will. Let me see who else. Then we got that. That's right. Tay Marie coming in from California. So we got a few Californians in here. That's right. Represent your city, your state, or country, or wherever you're coming in from. So it shouldn't be much longer before they start up. Once they start up, then we'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and mute myself and just hang around the background. This is going to be Oregon. These hearings they tend to be a lot longer than the ones we watch like in Connecticut and in Utah because they stay on the same individuals. Once this hearing finishes, I think we got another one coming up at 1 p.m. I want to say. So another one from Oregon. I haven't checked if there's any from Connecticut today, but if there is, obviously they're already over. But I'll go ahead and put them up. Let me see who else. We got Debbie coming in from California. We got Build Cool Things coming in. Long hearing. Let me see. Ernest, Iowa for now. Crazy Grandma coming in from Virginia. That's right. Coming in from the VA. Let me see who else do we got. Ernest, hello neighbor. That's right. Right down the street. Anyhow, so So yeah, so we'll have another one from Oregon once this one finishes at about 1 p.m. I want to say. Yesterday, hey, then we got Slum Baby 007 coming in from Sacramento, California. Woo woo. So yeah, so I got another stream going on one of the other platforms. We got Utah. That one's been going on since about 8 a.m. or no 8 a.m. 7 a.m. this morning. It's been going on for the last few hours, and then obviously I'm not participating in that one because I'm on this one. But I'm reading the comments over there in the background. So if you guys catch the playback, then thank you for the support. And hey, and one other thing, if you guys could go ahead and donate some hearts, some likes, some taps on the screen, they're free 99. And if you got any friends, buddies, ex-wives, anybody that you think would like these type of hearings, shoot it. Sharing is caring. That's what I say. Let me see what Snow put right here. She put, that's where I first lived in America, the 916. What? Now it's Utah. That's the first I lived. Are you originally from America, or are you from somewhere else? Snow. Let me see. Nisha, for Oregon, do they wait for the decision? So for Oregon, they take about 30 days before they read off or they let them know what the decision is. And I would say, and I'm not sure because I've never been to a board hearing because I've never been to prison. But if I'm assuming that the Oregon hearings are a little bit more similar to the ones in California. Not that I've seen any California ones. But we were able to watch those embanked hearings on Monday and Tuesday. Oh, speaking of California, I'm not sure if any of you guys were watching the hearing on Tuesday where what was it, Luster? What was his name? Larry? Was it Larry? No, something. Last name was Luster. I don't remember his first name. But that dude, he got found. He got found suitable, so they're gonna let him out. He should be coming on in the next, I would say, in the next 5 days. And that was the max. What was it? The max factor error. To that, what was it? It's a cosmetics line back in the early 2000s. He was that dude that was GHBing young women and recording it, and while they were unconscious, he was letting them have it. He was originally sentenced to 50 years, but they passed a proposition some years back where it made it if the assault, if the essay, okay, they're back on. Hold on. Oh, they put him back on the screen, but they're not talking. So they switched the law where if the person was unconscious when they were getting essayed, it was considered a non-violent offense.
All right, we are back on the record.
All right, we're back.
Hey, Mr. NULPH, looks like you might. Oh, looks like you just unmuted. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can.
Okay. All right. Good. All right, so we're going to move on, Mr. NULPH, talking about the psychological evaluation. And just so that the board members know, I'm going to also include in this topic questions about your criminal history because I think they're correlated and they're related, and it just makes it for us to cover both at the same time. So I'll ask questions about psychological evaluation. Looks like I'm cutting in and out just a weird message. So stand by for me 1 second.
And let me give a shout out to Jess coming in from Colorado, or Colorado, like I would say it. Highly appreciate the chat. My apologies. I didn't look to the left of my screen and I just saw it right now. Yeah. So essay crimes, they're if the person was unconscious, so if they were drugged, then it would be considered a non-violent offense. So that's how he was able to go to the parole board early, because he still had another 25 to do.
Okay,
before.
Mr. NULPH, am I able to be understood right now?
Okay.
You can understand me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, and I'm not cutting in and out anymore?
No, California.
A little fading in and out. I'm not sure why, but
okay.
I can hear and understand you.
Good. I'm just going to make sure I talk loudly then. Okay. So I don't know if you heard what I was saying, but my plan is to talk about the psychological evaluation with you and to talk about your criminal history. We're going to talk about both at the same time. Okay. So my first question, I'm just curious, how do you feel like the evaluation with Dr. Mosick went?
I was quite comfortable with it. Dr. Moshe was a very easy person to talk with, and she made me feel quite comfortable, and I felt that the evaluation went quite well.
Okay, was there any factual errors that you identified in your report that you want to correct for us?
Nothing specific that I think make the evaluation any different than what it is, no.
Okay, and was there anything in the evaluation process or reading the report that stood out to you, or where you kind of learned something about yourself?
I think that we covered everything thoroughly, and there were no surprises or anything new. I don't think that just stood out.
Okay. Dr. Mosick ultimately diagnosed you with alcohol use disorder, severe, in sustained remission in a controlled environment. What did you think of that diagnosis?
Yeah, when we discussed that, I told Dr. Moses I always thought that was kind of comical, that the statement "in controlled environment," because that's sort of like saying that there's no drinking in dry counties, because anything that you have available to you out there is available to me in here. And the fact that I'm sober today is because I choose to be sober. If I wanted to be high or drunk, I could be high or drunk. So that idea of it being a controlled environment, I always found kind of comical, although I understood the fact that, well, this is the Department of Corrections, I'm in a correctional facility, so it is supposed to be a controlled environment.
Well, what's interesting about that is I feel like folks tend to get confused by that. And what that doesn't mean, Mr. NULPH, is that there's no alcohol there. Everybody knows that there's alcohol and drugs in prison. It's unfortunate, it really is. But we all know, including the doctors, they know, right? There's drugs and alcohol in prison.
Yes.
What it means, though, is that the number of eyes on you, the amount of just kind of general attention that's on you is far higher than in the community, right? Folks drink all the time in the community without detection because there's less eyes on those folks, right? Versus if you start drinking in prison, there's just a higher likelihood that you're going to get caught because you've got folks looking at you all the time, talking to you all the time. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
So can you see how if you're in a controlled or more controlled environment like prison, that's a little different, right, than being in the community when you don't have a staff member having eyes on you all the time, right?
Yes.
You think that makes sense?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay. And, really, ultimately, her diagnosis reflects the fact that alcohol has caused significant problems in your life and contributed to you engaging in some really significant criminal behavior. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes, with at least allowing me to say that I don't blame the alcohol. The alcohol has been a problem for me, no doubt. And drinking, I recognize, does lower inhibitions, but the alcohol is not the excuse for me having committed the crimes that I did. I chose to do that. And so alcohol is a problem, but it's not the cause of, or the reason why I did the things that I did.
Yeah, no, message on that received. So ultimately, Dr. Mosick took all the information before, read all the information in the record, had that long interview with you, and she came to some conclusions. And her ultimate conclusions was that your risk for future sexual violence was estimated to be moderate, and your risk for future non-sexual violence was estimated to be low. What did you think of her ultimate conclusion?
I understood her decision given the history, my history, that's understandable, and according to the programs that she used, or in that she found that they were to be moderate or low. I think the same ones that the Department of Corrections uses, the ACRE score and the public risk score, showed a little bit different than being low, I think, in both of those categories. And on ACRES in the public, one that the department uses, and other studies show that it would probably be much less than moderate to low to, almost non-existent, given my age and other health issues and concerns. But her findings, I don't have a problem with or disagreement with that. I certainly understand why she would have said moderate or low, given the history.
Well, and I guess I would say, in a way, it kind of makes sense because, you're someone who hasn't committed only one sexual offense or one crime like that, right? You've engaged in multiple of them, and so there is some amount of weight given to just kind of your history, and that's frankly kind of what she's looking at, right? She looks at the totality of everything, including your history, not just your age and the other things, right?
Yes, sir.
So, Dr. Mosick made some recommendations, and I remember your attorney saying that you agree with all those. So I just have one question for you about one of them, which is, she recommends that you engage in sexual offense treatment in the community. I was just curious, what do you think you could learn from sex offender treatment, if anything?
Again, as I stated earlier, I hope that we never stop learning, or I never stop learning more about myself and getting greater insight into myself. And through all of those programs, there's always the I'm getting at a loss for words. Unfortunately, my mind works that way, or doesn't work well that way sometimes. The relapse prevention therapy that's involved in all of these programs, whether it be the sex offender program or alcohol program or anger management, all of those things that help us to understand and recognize the triggers or in disappointments, whatever it may be, that cause us to act differently and decide to get off in spinning off into the cycle that we have a tendency to get into. Those would always be available and would be a reinforcement that would be involved in the program. And one of the reasons that I've shown or wanted, I have a desire to, as I explained in my parole plan options, to continue those programs, so that I am always on guard, so to speak, for any of that.
So it sounds like your focus is really thinking about, kind of how do you avoid relapse? How do you continue to make better decisions? That's kind of what you want to stay focused on.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to read to you a section from the report. Frankly, I feel like we've actually been talking a lot about this already today, but it's a really important part of the report. And I just want to make sure that I think what we've been talking about matches up from your perspective with what she was saying. So this is from, so everyone knows, it's page 55 of the board's packet and page 31 of the evaluation itself. So this is what she writes. Quote, Mr. NULPH's history of sexual violence reflects a pattern of impulsive and opportunistic sexual crimes in response to feelings of anger and rejection. It has served as an attempt to exert control over a situation. Prior violence has occurred in the context of significant life stressors and disappointments. In the absence of more pro-social coping skills, Mr. NULPH resorted to drinking alcohol and utilizing sexual activity to alleviate uncomfortable emotional states. In pursuit of willing and, quote, easy, unquote, sexual encounters, he was met with rejection, resulting in increased anger and rumination. He subsequently exerted his control on available victims to prioritize his own sexual needs. Think that's on point?
Yeah, she says it much better than I could possibly have. I think she's very on point.
That seemed that way to me too, and it seems a lot of the things that we've been talking about so far today too. So it's kind of matching up a lot with what we've already been talking about. She goes on to say, thus, Mr. NULPH's risk for future violence, and she specifies sexual and non-sexual, is increased when he experiences failures, disappointments, or rejection, resulting in heightened emotional arousal and perceived actual loss of control. Additional factors that would increase his risk include using alcohol or using sexual activity as a tool to cope with emotions. So again, kind of a lot of what we've been talking about already today, right?
Yes, sir.
So, you already talked a little bit about this with Mr. Reese, but I think this is kind of the key point here, right? Which is, you already identified you're going to have moments of disappointment. You might have some failures. You may have moments of rejection if released, just like you might have in custody. That's going to continue, and it may happen in the community. In fact, I would probably count on it, right? So when you have a moment of rejection, disappointment, you feel failure, what I want to ask you right now is what exactly will you do in that moment to deal with those feelings? What is your plan?
First thing I would do was, and as I indicated, I think in my the steps, immediate steps upon release would be to establish contact with my support group and feelings in those disappointments. My first reaction would be to reach out to the individuals of my support group and to talk to them about that and how I'm feeling and what it was that caused that feeling to occur.
Okay, and if you have a feeling where you have an urge to take a drink of alcohol, how will you deal with that moment?
At that moment, I would hope when I get out and immediately become involved with celebrating recovery, one of my first steps will be then to seek a sponsor in that, so that I have a person who can relate to that feeling and want a drink because of a disappointment or some reason that we all use as the excuse for wanting a drink, that I could reach out to and talk to about that. And contact that sponsor and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling. And that person would help me to get through that, to walk through it. And we could maybe make an appointment to meet one another, sit down, have a cup of coffee and discuss it.
Okay. And if you're in a situation where you reach out to someone for support and you can't get a hold of them, like, right, you pick up the phone, you try to call, they don't answer the phone, you leave a voicemail, you don't hear back, what do you think you do in that moment? You know, you're reaching out, you're doing what you say you're going to do, reach out, try to get help, but you can't get someone. How would you manage that moment?
Yeah, well, I'm fortunate in the respect that I have a large support group for a number of people that I could reach out to. And in the very unlikely sense that none of those people would be available on the telephone, then I could always look to other source. Like there's almost, I'm aware that there's almost an AA group meeting going on somewhere all the time, and I could go to that AA group and not even having a sponsor with them, still being with them. I know that there's those people there that I could say, hey, I just need to talk to somebody about this, and there would be someone available to talk to. And in the event that there wasn't an AA group going on closely to wherever I'm at the time, or it just wasn't happening at that time, there's always a church or that I could go to, pray and talk to myself and reflect. And in most cases, there's always a priest available at a church somewhere that I could go and talk to, and that I would have no hesitation reaching out to.
Okay. And I know you want to engage in some services with the VA. That's part of your plan, the Veterans Administration. So do you have, how do you foresee the VA playing a role in what we're talking about right now?
Okay. The VA in White City that I'd like to go to has what I've been introduced to and told to, has an excellent alcohol and drug program, which I would like to get involved in and go through. And they also have a transitional program and when it was originally designed, was for returning vets coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq, and though I've not served in a war zone, and that prison actually is a little bit like a war zone, and getting out that recovery program and transition program would fit very well into my transitioning back into the community. The same skills that they're teaching the vets coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, transition back into society, I could use to transition myself into society. And simply the program there, I have not met him, but I know an individual that has gone through the White City program and says that the counselors are excellent counselors and available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so I know that there is someone there that I could always reach out to and that I could contact. and sit down and talk to about anything that I needed to do or desired to talk to him about.
Okay. All right. Well, that covers the questions I had. Most of the questions from the psychological evaluation. I do have a few questions about your criminal history. And, the first thing I just want to acknowledge is, I have a few specific questions from the crimes for which you've been convicted for. And I just want you and every other person here today at the hearing to understand that, or to at least hear that the board is mindful that we sometimes have to ask some very specific questions. Those specific questions can be hard for folks to talk about, and certainly can be very difficult for folks to hear. And so, these questions are asked very mindfully. I would not be asking these questions if I do not think it would be important for me to ask them for my own purposes as the board member leading this hearing.
Somebody has to ask these hard questions.
So when you talked to Dr. Mosick about the sexual abuse that you committed against Miss Colby, but when you talked to her, you told her that you couldn't really remember the sexual assault of her. But Dr. Mosick makes clear that when you talked to Dr. Stotler-Turner a few years ago, that you did remember that. And I was just curious, why is there a change where you now say you're not remembering sexually assaulting her in the report?
I think the confusion is in the fact that there were two separate incidents.
Oh.
The one in 1973, the one that I indicate, and that Miss Kelly had asked me about, in which I said I didn't remember. That's when I was received a driving under the influence and was brought back to our residence with the military police, and I don't recall that incident.
You don't remember the first one, but you remember the second one.
I've never gathered or wanted or believed that Mary Ann would make up stories about that or say anything that was not, accurate in it. So I think there's the confusion lies that there's not memory of that, but there is a second assault that occurred during the time of our divorce, our separation in our divorce.
The second one should have never happened. The first one should have never happened.
I do recall.
Okay, so you do recall sexually assaulting Miss Colby at least one time, is what I'm
yes.
And I'm going to go to the page. On page 28 of the the board's packet, page 4 of the psychological evaluation.
And for anybody wondering, these are live. This is actually happening in real
time. So this
time.
is what it says that you said to Stotler-Turner. Quote, he acknowledged that there was another time that he was able to remember, the time wherein he also remembered striking her. He explained that he was able to remember the incident despite having consumed alcohol that night and raped her, quote, out of anger and being a control issue, unquote. He denied that she fought back, but also acknowledged that she did not enjoy it. He indicated that he stopped the rape prior to ejaculation, but denied that he was suffering from problems related to sexual arousal. Is that still accurate from your memory?
Yes, sir.
Okay. As to the rape and murder of Miss Christians, when you think about what you did in that crime and the impact that you had on her family, how do you feel like her family was impacted by your crime?
I know exactly how her family was impacted because Kim and I discussed that to some length in our correspondence. And it destroyed her family. In respect to Kim and her brother, they lost her mother, and they ended up being uprooted from their home in Canada Beach and went to Minnesota to live with their father, who they hadn't previously lived with, of course, after the divorce of their mother and so yeah, it's difficult for them, and it's difficult for them in the sense that they're young. Kim at the time was 14. Her brother was a couple of years younger than that, and I think about that when I think of how I felt when my parents got divorced and how that made me feel in losing one of them. And I lost one because to divorce. They lost a mother to murder, and Kim was old enough at the time that she read things in the paper about it and stuff, and it hurt her. And she talked to me about the effects that it had on the community, Cannon Beach being a small community, and that occurring in that area, how it affected the community at large, and that not only being angry, but being frightened and scared. And that, so yeah, I know how it affected them. And it wasn't good. None of it was good.
You know, it's kind of unusual for me to hear that a member of a family from a murder, you know, was able to interact with someone directly who committed that murder while in prison. And it sounds like this happened quite a while ago. At least it started to happen quite a while ago. It's interesting. It's not something I hear about very often. I'm just curious if you have an understanding about kind of why do you think that interaction ultimately happened? Like, why do you feel like ultimately you were able to communicate with Kim?
Well, if Kim had not reached out to me and written to me, I probably never would have been able to. I feel very fortunate that she did reach out and write me the letter. And our correspondence began and continued for several years after that, and during which time I was not only able to answer her questions and talk with her, but she also contacted a friend of mine, Mary Bambrick, who was a good friend then and still is, and Kim had contacted and talked with her, had contacted and talked with a pastor friend of mine, and with Craig Plunkett, who helped me get through that. And I feel very fortunate for that opportunity to occur. And our correspondence, though it went on for several years, we don't do it regularly any longer. I still write a letter to her occasionally, just updating her on how I am doing, what I'm doing, and we exchange greeting cards, holiday greetings, and that. But we both have expressed a desire at some point in time to meet in person, and I look forward to that possibility and do expect that it will one day happen. And I imagine that when it does, that Craig will play a great part in that with too. He has shown an interest and a desire to help both Kim and I to work through that. He has agreed to be a facilitator in that and for us meeting, and that will happen one day, I'm sure.
Okay. Well, I just want to let you know, because I want to prepare you that if you were to be released, you know, what the board's going to do is we're going to issue an order. If you get released, we would issue an order that says that you cannot have any contact with members of the deceased victim's family. So that would include Kim. So if you we're in a position that Kim would want to have contact with you and vice versa, you'd have to work all that through your PO. The PO would have the discretion to allow it, but you would need to follow your PO and go through your PO's process to allow that. Okay? Did you hear that, Mr. Knoll?
Yes, I understand that either in any case where Kim would have to be the one to initiate that, or my children or anybody, I understand that they're the ones that have to be in control to initiate any contact.
Yeah, and if the board has issued a no contact order and she were to contact you, the only thing you could do is say, I can't talk to you, contact my PO, and then you hang up the phone. Like, that's it, right? You can't contact her unless your PO has given you a permission to have that contact. If she came up to you on the street and for some reason, you'd have to walk away if your PO hasn't given you permission. So just making sure you understand that.
Okay, I understand. Was a little fuzzy there, but I understand. In case if there was any contact, first thing I should do would be to contact the parole officer and say, hey, this has occurred, and let the parole officer work it out.
That's right, because the parole officer has discretion to allow those kinds of things. It's built into the language of the condition that we impose, and that's for a reason, right? I mean, it makes sense to give your PO some discretion in that, but you just got to work through with your PO on those kinds of things. So,
yeah.
You know, given the unique history here, I wanted to make sure you understand that in case you were to get released, okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I have a few questions for you about your Multnomah County rape case against Virginia B. And what I just want to first understand is the record indicates that you'd made some threatening statements in the course of the sexual assault. And so, given your history, I'm just curious. I mean, what do you think you were planning on doing, or what do you think was going to happen after you finished the sexual assault? So if that had not been interrupted, what was your plan?
Good question.
I thought I would walk away from it. And I didn't think that at the time, I didn't think that, you know, I certainly didn't expect the police to arrive.
You didn't think you were going to get caught?
Had they not, then my intention was I would just walk away from it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think that it would go on beyond that.
He's a monster. Just deny him already. Don't even wait the 30 days. Just let him have it.
Because, you know, when I look at your history, you know, one of the considerations in my mind was, you know, were you at any point considering killing her?
No, sir. I don't recall those threats that Ms. Carlson said that I made. I very well may have in the process of taking control. I don't. But one of the things that I know about me from my first murder was that the Marine Corps taught us all that we were capable of killing, and they taught us how to kill. But what they didn't teach, and what they couldn't possibly teach, was how we would feel after we had done that. And when I committed my murder, I didn't know the feelings that it was going to cause me after the fact. And having done it once, I knew that I couldn't and would never do it again. I didn't ever want to have that feeling that I did the first time. And that's so in 1986, no, there was no thought about doing that. I expected that I would just walk away from it and that there would be no, it would go no farther than what it had.
That's kind of interesting because I'm just curious, you know, based off that, is there a reason why you feel like you didn't have the same reaction to sexual assault and rape?
I don't know. That is curious and a very good question. Why I didn't have the same feelings about that, and no, I don't have an answer for that, other than there's still a control thing that I had, and fortunately for at least myself and for Miss Christians, that I had the control to make the decision of whether it went any farther than just that. And I chose and not to allow it to go any farther than that I knew that it wouldn't.
Okay. What do you think the impact of your crimes against Virginia B? What do you think the impact was for her and her family?
Of her and her family?
Yes.
I expected it was the same impact that my crime did, although it was a murder in 1986. The impact was probably no less. It was still a horrific crime, and one which created fear and a lot of distress, and for her family, I'm sure that it had the same effect on them as my crimes in 1980 or 1976 had on Miss Christian's family and Kim and her brother and Miss Christian's immediate family, her siblings, and that. It is a horrible thing to have to live with and to feel and to think about. I'm sure that the impact on them was enormous. Now, I know it was on Miss Christian's, and I'm sure it was on Miss Carlson as well.
When you know, it's my understanding that in this crime, she woke up from sleep and found you there in her bed, and that's when the sexual assault began.
Yes, sir.
So she literally woke up and immediately was assaulted. You know, I think about the fact that like a home is a safe space for folks, right? Like that is a space where folks are supposed to feel safe. So what do you think the impact was for the fact that in a safe space, she woke up to you and then experienced a brutal sexual assault, the way in which it played out? I mean, how do you think that impacted her?
I imagine that impact caused her never quite feel safe ever again anywhere. And for a long time, I suppose that she double checked her doors every night and windows every night, make sure that they were locked and secure, and then still carried doubts of whether or not she would still be safe even then.
Okay. All right. Well, Mr. NULPH, thank you for answering my questions on these topics. I know I had a few kind of tougher questions for you in this section, and I appreciate you answering my questions. I'm going to see if Ms. Kuklinski has any questions for you about the psychological evaluation as well as your criminal history. Ms. Kuklinski.
I do not have any remaining questions in either of these topics. So, Mr. Reese.
I don't have any further questions.
Okay, thank you both. And then the last topic is the parole plan. Mr. Nulph, I've read through your parole plan. Is there any updates to your plan? Anything new that you want to tell us about?
No updates at all that I'm aware of.
Okay. And I've asked you many of the questions I already kind of wanted to ask you that connect to your plans for parole. So I don't have any more specific questions. The only thought I have for you, though, is I know one of your potential plans deals with an interstate compact potential. And I think that's your number 2 plan. So just, you know, if the board were to move forward with a release in your case, I would really encourage you, if that were to happen, to immediately start working with the release counselor as soon as you can, and really work with the counselor about ordering which of these makes sense, because interstate compacts, just so you know, they can take 60 plus days for those to get decided. So just want to give you that information. All right, Ms. Kuklinski, do you have any questions about the parole plan or any remaining questions for Mr. Nulph?
Well, I was curious, you know, I'm pretty familiar with the White City domiciliary, which I don't think they call it the domiciliary anymore. I think they call it something else, but that's always how I've known it. So that's how I refer to it. And I think that that's an excellent option. You know, I've seen a lot of really good come out of the veterans program there in White City. I'm curious though, because you do have, there are often, this is just the reality of the world that we live in. There are often some restrictions for those that have been convicted of sexual offenses. And I'm wondering if you've had any conversations specifically through the VA as to if your convictions would be a factor in your admittance into the program.
Yes, I'm aware that they do not restrict sex offenders from this White City program or any of the veterans programs for that matter. And so sometimes they're dealt on a one-on-one basis, I guess, but there are no restrictions. I would be able to go there to White City for parole.
And have you been having conversations with someone specifically about being accepted into that program?
I have not spoken specifically with anyone. I have correspondence with White City the program, and they sent me paperwork for application and that for it, and stating that I needed a recommendation from a counselor here for the alcohol and drug program that participate in that. But I haven't spoken personally with them. We have a new person, Miss Rogers, who had been here in Salem for a number of years, has retired, I guess. And we have a new person that was just started that our commander of the veterans program here has written and informed that I would like to meet with personally and talk to, and that individual hasn't come into a CI yet, but I hope to be able to meet and talk with them personally when they do.
Okay, so okay. And I've seen Miss Davis kind of shaking her head, and I'm wondering, I'm just going to kind of ask for some clarification. Miss Davis, have you had any direct communication?
Yeah, I was just shaking my head that I can address this in closing if that's easier. I have had direct communication with both of the Oregon VA social workers managing their transitional programs. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. That's great. Thank you. That will be the clarification I think I need. I do not have any additional questions regarding your parole plan. So I will turn it over to Mr. Reese.
And I don't have any further questions.
Okay, thank you both very much. So with that, Mr. Nulph, that concludes the portion of the hearing for the board asking you questions. And so what we're going to start doing next is we're going to start hearing from our other participants that are here today for the hearing. And as I noted at the beginning of today's hearing, we have Clatsop County District Attorney Ron Brown here with us today. So, sir, I will turn the floor over to you to make whatever statement you would like to make to the board members. Thank you very much for being here today.
You're welcome. Thank you. Members of the board, ladies and gentlemen, just have a few points to make. I think that Mr. Nulph is a stat mixture of lots of triggers and a low threshold for anger. And it seems like there's more triggers now in the world than there were in the 1980s because it's a lot more complicated. I know personally that with computers and things like that, Mr. Nulph is only a year older than I am, and so I would foresee that he would have more problems now than he would have had in 1986. Alcohol is extremely available out in the world, and it is an angry world in general. So I submit that he is should not be released. I thought it was significant that when the board was asking him questions about why the murder happened, he seemed to want to blame his ex-wife for making him so angry that he struck her. So I think that's an additional problem, is shifting the blame to other people, or thinking that someone has a right to know some information, so therefore, even though they don't want to, he has contact with them because in his mind they have the right to know something. So that's the problem. Mr. Nulph can deviate from the rules based on his view of reality.
Mr. Brown, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you're breaking in and out quite a bit as you speak. We're able to hear and understand pretty much most of what you're saying. I think what's happening is when you sit back a little bit, we can. There's no breaking up. So it seems like it happens when you're closer and maybe looking at a second monitor. So I don't know how that could cause a problem, but it's just my impression. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make sure that you know that we're having a few problems kind of hearing every single word you say.
Thank you for pointing that out.
We also have we would ask the board not if the board does release him, that he not be released back to Clatsop County because one of the Francis Christian's children lives in our county and has asked that he need to be paroled here if he isn't paroled. But I believe that speak for the victims' family here, at least part of them, that they oppose his release. And on behalf of our county, we certainly oppose his release.
He needs to get a headset.
Sometimes people just dig such a deep hole they can't dig their way. And Mr. Nulph is not the deepest hole I've seen. So I would ask that we can.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Brown. You cut out on that last sentence you said. Can you just say that one more time, please?
Just have him call
I
in.
just asked that his parole be denied.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Again, I don't know why we were struggling a little bit, but I know I was able to get everything pretty much you said with just a few exceptions, and I understand what your statement was. I'm assuming my fellow board members feel the same way, but please chime in.
100%.
That you heard Mr. Brown. Okay, I'm seeing head shakes from the board members that they heard you, sir. Again, thank you very much for being here. And so next, we're going to hear from, again, the victim of the Multnomah County case, Virginia B. So Virginia, I would just ask you if you could please unmute your microphone at this time and please make whatever statement you would like to make again, directly to the board members.
I gotta get this dude on the
and not to
screen.
Mr. Nulph. Thank you again so much for being here and for being willing to speak to us today.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to speak with you. I said here, I've attended a couple of these parole hearings, and to me personally, since he kidnapped me for 8 hours and brutally raped me, he had a chance to go away when I pulled a gun on him. He chose to come back and say, "No effing bitch is going to pull a gun on me. I'm going to rape you repeatedly, and then when your boyfriend comes home tomorrow, he's going to find your throat cut laying in a puddle of blood, and you're going to be dead." At that point, I didn't know that he had already murdered, or I probably wouldn't have been able to withdraw and survive this, because his intentions were completely to murder me. He had a gun to my head. He raped me repeatedly for 8 hours. He sodomized me. He beat me. And the impact that it has had on my entire life has been hell from 1985 till today. He is absolutely right. I look over my shoulder everywhere I go. I double lock my doors. I have a dog. I don't have a gun, but I feel that if the state, if they let him out, that you're forcing me to have to do something that I don't even believe in. I pulled a gun on someone once. I fought for my life, and I got it taken away from me and used on me, put it to my head, while he proceeded to direct me on things that he wanted me to do. And this went on again for 8 long hours. And this isn't about revenge. This isn't about getting even. He has caused tremendous pain in my life. I've had years of dialect therapy, and it still doesn't help. And every time I come up with this parole hearing, it's like reliving everything all over again. All I hear from him is how this has affected him. He says that this, he understands that this affects people, but he wants to get on with his life. What about the lives he destroyed? He destroyed Frances's life. She's not here to defend herself. He destroyed her children's lives. He destroyed my life. He's destroyed any relationship that I've ever been able to have, because I just can't. There's just no way. And again, years of therapy has not helped. This man's intention, if I would not have escaped, would have been to kill me. Again, he was in my bed. I woke up. I jumped out. He followed me. I got a gun. He left the house. Hour later, after I had gotten my girlfriend on the phone, he proceeded to come back and fight me for the gun and took it away from me and proceeded to brutally, and we're not talking about, as he has put it, having sex and he would walk away, because that would never be his intention, because he's made it very clear throughout that time that he was going to kill me. He wrote a letter to my boyfriend after he went to jail stating, "You need to tell that bitch that she needs to clear my name because she knows that she wanted it." He never took responsibility for that. He's never taken responsibility. The last parole hearing said that he thought he could come in and have sex with me because he heard that I had a reputation and he wanted to have sex. So he just figured he could come into my safe space and do this. And I guess my question that I have more than anything is, again, this isn't about revenge, but he brutally raped his wife. He brutally raped Frances and murdered her. He brutally raped me. Because he's 72 years old does not mean that he does not have revenge in his mind, does not mean he can't come up with a gun, does not mean that he couldn't abduct some child. And I guess my question to you is, if you could allow him to live next to you, if you could allow him to be in the streets with your grandchildren or your children or your wife, and you would feel safe and comfortable, then you're a better person than me, because I don't, and I never will. And if he gets out, this is like being raped and traumatized all over again. And so I am asking you with every bit. I know that he's already been able to be paroled online. And when he was convicted, he was given 155 years. Then the judge dropped it down to 75 years. Then from another thing, they dropped it down to 30 years. And so every time I relive this parole hearing, it's like being raped and sodomized and brutalized all over again. And so I'm asking you, as someone who didn't deserve this, I was in my own bed sleeping, that you do everything to consider keeping this man in prison, because I don't believe that he has ever changed. I've listened to him go on and on and on about how it's everybody else's fault but his. And that's not right. I don't believe that he can ever be healed. And the DA is right. He raped me because he was disappointed in his job. That's why he decided to drink and rape me. And so what's to say that he's not going to come out and get disappointed because at 72 years old, with no possibilities of a job, and people making him register as a sex offender and do all these programs, that he is not going to be disappointed again. And the first thing that he may have on his mind is revenge because I put him in prison for 40 years. This is just not right. So I'm just asking you, with everything that I have, please consider everything. It's not like he did one thing and he got a strike and now he gets to get out because he did his time and he's rehabilitated. Because this has been a pattern of his from the 70s. He got out on a mishap he got life in prison. He got out after 10 years. It wasn't 45 days from jail that he was in my house putting a gun to my head, brutally raping me. And I just don't believe, because of age, because of anything, that he can't do that again. And it may not be to me, but it may be to a child. It may be to your grandchild if he was in your neighborhood. So I'm just asking you to please reconsider this before letting him out, because he will get to destroy lives all over again. And it just doesn't seem fair.
Straight up. What do you guys think? Hey, that was very emotional right
Virginia,
now.
thank you.
What she just said.
Very, very much for being here. You've told us the impact that this process has had on you, and I just appreciate you choosing to be here to tell us what you want us to know. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't want him as my neighbor at 100 years
so,
old.
So, Mr. NULPH and Ms. Davis, we've come to the point in the hearing where you all get to have the final word today. You get to respond to any of the comments that were made, of course, by District Attorney Brown or Virginia B. As always, I would just ask, if you choose to respond to those statements, please address, of course, the board and not directly any of those speakers. And then, of course, this is also your opportunity to make any closing comments or remarks. It sounds like, Ms. Davis, you have some kind of clarifications about the White City program too. So we'll turn the floor over to the two of you to provide any closing comments, remarks that you want to make.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to briefly make a couple of comments, and then if Mr. NULPH has anything he'd like to conclude with, I'll turn it to him. But first of all, thank you to everyone for being here. I appreciate the thoughtful questions posed by the board. And obviously the rape and Mr. NULPH's actions that day in 1986, let alone in 1976, are absolutely horrific. There is no justification, and no one should have to endure the things that the victims had to go through and continue to suffer with. However, as we noted in the opening, Mr. NULPH has served and completed the 30-year maximum sentence issued in the 1986 case. And I believe he has also articulated certainly to the best of his ability, that he does in fact have an understanding of and is very much both aware of and impacted by the realities of the harm that have resulted from his actions. And I believe that this is also reflected accurately in the 2024 mental health evaluation. Interestingly, Mr. NULPH mentioned how kind of the risk score is calculated in DOC, and I recently learned that for whatever reason they actually also use a static 99R, but their breakdown is only in 3 rather than 5 risk levels. And so in DOC's system, actually, he does fall in the low risk category for sexual reoffenses. I don't know why those things are different, but that is how it is reflected in DOC's system. In regards to the VA programs, I personally have spoken with the social worker, both at the White City campus representing Southern Oregon and the Northern Oregon social worker at the Multnomah County VA campus as well. Both have confirmed that assuming he would be granted the ability to transfer his parole to another county, beyond Clatsop, that they absolutely are able to accommodate sex offenders. They have single gendered housing, so there's not women in the housing programs, there's not families either. And so those would be in accordance with, potentially any conditions he might have as a sex offender. That's also true of Restoration House in Clatsop County. I recognize the DA's view of that, and I think that is shared by Mr. NULPH, that recognition that one of the victims' family members, the son of Miss Christian, and as well as there may be other family that are still in that area in Cannon Beach. At the very least, what we can say is, should he need to parole to Clatsop, which again is not his first choice either, Restoration House is based in Seaside, so at least it's, not specifically in the same small community where the crime occurred. And they are also single gendered and specifically able to deal with individuals with more complex behavioral needs and accommodate sex offenders as well. In addition, just kind of lastly, I think that kind of as much as we all recognize that, it is a difficult world that we live in right now. Technology changing is always difficult. It certainly doesn't get easier reintegrating the longer that you've spent in custody. However, to hold that reality kind of against Mr. NULPH, I think is potentially overstepping the ability to compensate for the challenges of reentry with the support network and the other additional support systems and counseling and programs that Mr. NULPH is not only amenable to participating in, but actually desiring to engage with. And lastly, I did not know Mr. NULPH and frankly wasn't born in 1986 or 76, but I have spent many hours working with Mr. NULPH as the person that he is today. And while I agree with the victim, Virginia, who spoke, that I don't think anybody in their right mind would want to live next to the person that Mr. NULPH was in 1986.
86 or right now.
I don't believe personally that he is that person today. The person that I have gotten to know over this time is somebody that I would live next to. That being said, I get that, this is not an easy case. It's not an easy decision for the board to make. And I do hope very much that they will see that there are enough supports in place that I believe he will be successful. And I believe that he has done a significant amount of work to honestly and candidly address the issues that he very much is aware he needed to develop and grow in. So thank you again very much for your time and your attention today and your questions. I appreciate it. And Yeah, thank you.
So let me see. So I had
And Mr. Nolf, if you have any final words that you'd like to share, now's the time to do that, okay?
Yes, thank you. Yeah,
he talked enough already.
Didn't understand very much of what Mr. Brown was saying. I think I did get the impression and understanding that his opposition to my parole, which I would expect that he would take in his position, and his opposition to me being in Clatsop County, which I understand. And Ms. Carlson's statement, I fully understand her anger and reasons why she feels the ways that she feels. I just hope that the board sees that the person I am now is not the same monster that Ms. Carlson has described, or that the monster that Mr. Brown doesn't want back in Clatsop County. And my parole option plans were made with those things in mind, not wishing to return to Clatsop County where I might be a cause for concern for anybody there, and not wishing to necessarily go to Multnomah County, because even though it's a large county, it's a small world, so they say, you know. And I have family in that area. Miss Carlson still in Multnomah County. My children live in Clackamas County, and Marianne, I believe, is somewhere in the Multnomah Clackamas County area, and I don't want to inadvertently run into them anywhere on the street and cause them any kind of distress, you know, by knowing that possibility exists. So that's why my first option was to parole to White City, where I could obtain the resources of the Veterans Administration and the counseling that's available there, and to continue to participate in that. And then the second option was to parole out of state completely and be away from all of the possibilities of encounterment. I hope that the board does see that the individual I am today is not the same monster that existed in 76 or 86.
You're just an older monster.
Person. And the things that I've done, the programs that I've done, as I say, nothing that I can say or do can undo those things, but the programs that I have done have undone the person and the monster that existed then. And I'm not any longer that person in that, but in fact, if a person could be positive and contributing member to society, if the parole should grant me parole. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolf. Thank you, Ms. Davis. Thank you to all of our participants. So what's going to happen next is the parole board is, we're going to end the hearing here in just a second, and the board members, we will be meeting at a later date and time to deliberate your case, Mr. Nolf. We will then reach a decision, and that decision will be communicated to you in writing. So you're going to get an order from the board that essentially provides you our decision. That decision will, of course, be sent to all the participants here today, as well as, of course, your attorney, Ms. Davis, as well. So with that, the hearing is concluded. The record is closed. And again, you will expect to receive a decision from us within the next 30 days. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Mr. Nolf, if you want to give me a call, you have my phone number, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Talk to you later.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Oh, that's it. It's over. Let me see. Are they going to keep? Oh, they cut the camera fast today. Damn. Anyhow, so let me see. I was reading some of these messages over here. Let me see where'd they go? Where'd they go? I can't see them anymore. Let me see here. So okay, so anybody that just got in late and are not aware of what he did, he committed 3 violent acts of SA, the letter S and the letter A in capitals, and he also unalived 1 person. He should have never been let out, but they let him out, and look what happened. And let me see, Elaine, just send me a DM, and we could talk about your husband and him and you wanting him to come on. Let me see. So for Oregon, we're gonna have another hearing at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So right now it's 11:53. So in about a little bit over an hour, we'll be back on. Right now, oh damn, the one for Utah just finished. All right, so I guess I don't have anything else running but this right now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a little break for an hour. I'll be back. Hopefully I'll see you guys back. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. It's my favorite price, free 99, and that'll help us get bigger and get bigger. Isn't that what everybody wants on TikTok and YouTube? Trying to get bigger, trying to hit that 20,000 followers. Unfortunately in the last weeks, TikTok's definitely restricted me. We were growing for a minute crazy, but they put an end to it. Hey, thank you for whoever sent that. I'm not even sure who sent that. Giberson, thank you, highly appreciate that heart. Let me see. So yeah, so I appreciate any follows, but we'll be back shortly in about an hour. I'm gonna go ahead and cut the stream, and I'll see you guys back later. And like I say around here, life's like a candle. Once you blow it out, it's lights out. And with that, but we want to know now. That's right. Hey, I wish they would say now. It's not like other states, Utah and Oregon. They don't let you know. They don't let you know at the same time. Just send an email to a TikTok saying you're doing this for educational purposes. They can get an agent too. What? Okay. I'm gonna see what I could do. I thought those emails, or when you reach out to him, I thought it was an automatic reply or AI that was replying to you. But you know what? I did read something on Reddit about that, about getting an agent or becoming part, under an agency, and supposedly that'll help with you getting hit or restricted. But okay, I'll do a little bit of Googling and check because you know what, the other way that I was streaming previously, I like it way better than this one, because in the other one I get to have everything on the screen myself, the individuals on the meeting, and then also the comments. So the other way does definitely work a lot better. But yeah, so I'm gonna cut the stream now. I'll be back in an hour. So you guys go ahead and get refreshed, brush your hairs, and all that good stuff. Get some water, some food. Take a lunch break. Email, nice try. Sincerely, the parole board. By the way, I'm in the 916. That's right. That's Sacramento, right? Let me see. Elaine, system is so effed up. It can be at times, especially if you're in it. It's not there to benefit you. Let's see. Tree hugger has me cracking up over here. All right, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and cut it. All right, I'll be back shortly.